Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're going to start in just a couple of minutes. There are still people getting into the room. So let's give them a couple of minutes, all right? Welcome, and thank you for your punctuality. Hi, Alex. Welcome. We're about to start.
Great. Yeah, hi everyone.
Hi, everyone. Hi again for those that were very punctually waiting for this webinar. I know that all of you are very eager to get to know a little bit more about the scholarship in general, but specifically today about this exam that is going to be part of our process to get the scholarship and maybe to get to a program at the university in the United States. My name is Adriana Molina. I am an advisor and an EducationUSA advisor based in Michoacán. Thank you again for joining us. This session is part of a series of webinars that we are organizing. EducationUSA is in a national program that aims, helping people to make better and more competitive applications for the scholarship, COMEXUS scholarship, Fulbright-García Robles. Specifically, we are here in this webinar to talk about an exam. May I remind you that yesterday we had another webinar talking about a different exam. If you didn't catch it, make sure that you join our Facebook group. In a minute, I'm going to share the link in our comment section. And by the way, if you have any questions, any comments that you want to share with today's guests, please make sure that you write your questions or your message to our chat section, all right? Make sure then to join our Facebook group, to check all the information that we are uploading there almost daily during the webinar series. Welcome, and may I introduce Marianne Schlickeisen? I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, and Alex Wood. They come here in representation of IELTS, and well, welcome.
Great. Thank you so much for having us. We're excited to be here.
Thank you for being here. We're all ears.
Okay, excellent. Great. So I'll actually let my colleague Alex go ahead and introduce himself.
Yeah, thanks, Marianne. And thanks to EducationUSA for having us here today. So my name is Alex Wood. I'm the Commercial Development Manager for the British Council exams. And our principal and flagship exam of the British Council is IELTS. So I'm joining Marianne today to talk to you about that.
Great. Thanks, Alex. And my name is Marianne Schlickeisen. I'm the Graduate Program and Research Manager with IELTS USA. So I'm based in Washington, D.C., but I work closely with EducationUSA to make sure that they have all the information about IELTS that they can share with you all. So today we are going to give you an overview of IELTS if you're not familiar with it. So a high-level overview of IELTS. And then I'll hand it over to Alex to sort of dive into the test taker journey of what you can expect if you register to take IELTS. And then he's also going to walk us through the different sections of the test and how best to prepare yourself for each of those 4 sections of the test. But we also welcome questions, so feel free to use that question box as we're going through the presentation, and we'll be sure to get to those at the very end. So a quick overview of IELTS. It is a test of international English, so it's not just American English or British English. There are all types of accents that you might hear during the IELTS exam. And that is a true representation of the type of English that is spoken, I think, in the United States, because we have very different accents throughout our country. And it is helpful, I think, to be accustomed to listening to English in all different types of accents. The test is made up of 4 skills: listening, reading, writing, and speaking. And regardless of how you take the test, whether it's the paper-based test or the computer-delivered test, you always have a live face-to-face speaking component with an IELTS examiner. And many students actually tell us that they enjoy this part of the test because it's more of a conversation. You're not just talking to a computer screen, but you're actually conversing one-to-one with an individual person. There are 2 tests, the IELTS Academic and the IELTS General Training. So IELTS Academic is what we're going to focus on today because that's what universities in the US are going to be looking for. The scores range from 0 to 9 when you get your score report, and the test includes a variety of question types. So it's not just multiple choice, there's fill in the blank, matching, etc. And it's jointly owned by 3 global partners. So British Council and IDP administer the test around the world, and Cambridge Assessment English actually creates the test for us. So there are millions of tests taken each year. It's accepted by over 11,000 organizations, and it's used in over 140 countries. We have over 1,600 test venues around the world. Inside the US, it's accepted by over 3,400 US institutions and over 7,000 individual programs. So there are a couple of options when you register to take the test. You can register to take a paper-based test. Some people feel more comfortable writing in English as opposed to taking the test on computer. So you can take the paper-based test. There's also the computer-delivered test. So either one of those, you're going to go to a test center to take those tests. A couple of differences to point out. The paper-based test is usually only offered 4 times per month, whereas computer-delivered is usually offered more frequently each month. The other big difference is the number of days before you receive your results. So with paper-based, it would take approximately 13 days before you receive your results. Whereas if you're taking it on a computer, you can receive those results in 1 to 5 days. So it's a much faster turnaround. Either way, you can send your scores to as many e-delivery accounts as you want. And most US universities have e-delivery accounts. So that's free. You do not have to pay extra if you want to send it to 10 or 15 different e-delivery accounts. We also have IELTS Online, which is sort of our at-home testing option. And this launched shortly after COVID. And it allows test takers the flexibility of taking the test at home. What I would suggest is that IELTS Online is a great option if you know for sure that you have reliable and consistent internet access. If you're at all worried about your internet access, most students, I think, feel more comfortable just going to a test center. That way they don't have to worry about if they have background noise at their home, somebody coming in and out of the room by accident while they're trying to take the test, that kind of thing. So just things to think about when you're deciding which type of test to take. We also offer IELTS One Skill Retake. This allows you to retake one section of the full IELTS test, so the listening, reading, writing, or speaking section, 60 days after you sit for the full test. So this is great if you take the test and you're just not pleased with one section of the test and you want to see yourself make an improvement, then you can retake that one section of the test. So just something to keep in mind. And then the IELTS test, like I mentioned, the scores range from 1 to 9. I would always check with the universities that you're applying to confirm what their IELTS cutoff score is, what they're looking for. But most US universities are looking for a score between 6 to 8 on the IELTS. And with that, I'll hand it over to Alex to talk a little bit about the test centers in Mexico. Is Alex still on, or did we lose him?
I think we lost him.
Oh, okay. All right, I'll go over his slides, and then if he jumps back on, I'll hand it back over to him.
Yeah, I'm back.
Oh, there you are.
Apologies, technology just fails you when you most need it. Thanks, Marianne. So just to let everybody know, there are 29 active test centres at the moment across the country, where there are 13 different city locations. So as you can see on the screen, we have representation of IELTS in a range of the provinces right the way across the Republic. So you can see there, I won't list off all of the testing locations. You will be able to find throughout the year, we do open different test centres for a variety of reasons. So that may in fact change and increase during the year, but these are the ones that are currently live right now. So if we move on to the next slide. And I'll just begin to take you through the key steps of the test. So to give you an idea of the test taker journey, that begins with registration. So we have a number of test sessions that are available through the year across those different test locations. So we always recommend that you take a look and get an idea of where the most convenient test centre is for you, and then look at the available dates. We do have constant dates throughout the year, especially if you're looking at taking the test on computer. So you can do it either on computer or on paper. Test sessions on paper are less frequent. So if that is your preference, as I say, it's very important to be looking at the availability of test sessions ahead of time. We'd normally recommend that you're looking to register at least 1 to 2 months ahead of the test session, if not more. Ideally, our test centres make the sessions available up to 6 months ahead of time, so you can plan well in advance. And I think the planning ahead of time is really important in taking away some of the stress that surrounds taking an exam, and we'll come on to some of the elements of being prepared for the test. So don't let the stress and worry about finding a test available in time so that you can collect your results within the time frame that you're looking to apply to an overseas institution get in the way. Very important couple of notes on here. Once you've completed your registration, which you can do online as well as make the payment online, it's important that you're aware of the requirements around your ID. So make sure that you have a valid and recognized ID according to the test center that you're registering with, and you will need to have that same ID on the day of the test. Also important to keep an eye on any email updates that you will receive on confirming your test session that you have applied for, to make sure that the transaction has gone through, and ahead of time, just in case, although unlikely, if there are to be any changes. So if we move on from registration, although I will just mention, sorry, the last caption on there does refer to any special requirements that anybody may have. And I think that's really important to be aware of, that you need to register well in advance of the test session, as it suggests here, at least 6 weeks prior. We do cater for a number of special needs or requirements, whether they be linked to specific disabilities. You can always inform the test centre that you're intending to register with, but do that before you register to see what kind of accommodations can be made. And that ranges from anything from physical disabilities through to certain specific learning needs. So that's something to check with the test centre that you will register with. So moving on to preparation, and one key motto is always be prepared. As they say, the only test that you don't need to prepare for is your eye test. Anything else you should be getting ready for and familiarizing yourself with the contents of that test. And that's very much the case with an English language test. I think from my experiences, many candidates make the mistake of assuming that if their level of English is good and they're confident with that, that's enough to carry them through with the test. That's not the case. I think even for us those of us that are native English speakers, a test like IELTS, it's still very important to be familiar with the content of the test, the type of questions, so you're ready and able to take it. So I'm going to talk you through some of those key elements, not just the preparation, but the different test content themselves, to give an idea, a very kind of superficial level, but an idea of what you should be prepared for. There are a range of preparation materials. So again, it's always good to have an idea of when you're going to take the test, what you need to know to be ready for that test. Those range of preparation materials, there are both free test preparation materials and also paid for. So again, you can take a look online and see what's available to you. There are some recommendations here. There's the Information for Candidates booklet that you can find readily available. You can also access that information online. There are official IELTS practice materials, books that many test centres have, so you can purchase those. And there's also IELTS Ready, which is a series of online materials that are available of no charge, so you can access those for free, and they provide mock tests, tips and videos, and as well as model answer guides, which are very useful. And you kind of upgrade that. If you register for the test with the British Council, you can access the premium version within the test price. So when it comes to the test day itself, again, very important to be aware of what awaits you. I think the one key advice here is to make sure that you arrive early, ahead of time. Again, one of the common mistakes that test takers make is thinking they can arrive at the time of the test. I've seen there are no special allowances made. I have seen people arrive to their test 10 to 15 minutes after it starts, or even at the very time. Let's say it's a 9 o'clock start, arrive at 9. Expecting to be able to step into the test room. That's not going to happen, and it's for a very important reason. It's important for us that there is fairness across the board for everybody. So we need to think about having a single standard approach to test day. So the same applies for everybody. And we really need to make sure that the validity and reliability of the test is intact, and also we're following the security protocols. This is a high stakes test for high stakes use, such as applying to universities in the US, and therefore those security protocols such as finger scans and taking your photo on the day of the test all lead to those aspects that can take time. So very much a case of arriving ahead of time. Also, to avoid any distractions, be aware that all belongings will be stored at the test centre, so don't carry any belongings with you that you really don't need, because they will be locked away in another room and kept at the test centre. So that's the test day itself. In terms of the results, the reason everybody is taking an English language test is not typically for the fun of it. It's because the results are required by a recognising organisation. So really important when you're planning your test, bear in mind the results turnaround. This is something that with IELTS on computer, the test results are now delivered typically between 2 and 3 days after you've taken the test, or at least when you've completed the full element. I'll come on to talk about the different sections of the test and how the speaking interview is a separate element of the test, and how that may impact when your final results come out. For the IELTS on paper, it's 13 days after the test that you've taken. You can preview the results up to 28 days after taking the test, and you do that online. For institutions, those that are receiving your results as part of your application process, they may request to see the physical test report form, or hopefully they will have access to our online verification system where they can see those results electronically. Again, that may be something that you want to check with the organization that you are applying to, just so that you're clear on whether or not you need to send results or whether or not they will access them themselves. The results in terms of validity, this is something that's often asked. That's typically something guided by the recognizing organization themselves, but normally is considered as 2 years after the test report form is produced. So bear that very much in mind in terms of your application process. There is an inquiry on results process. So if there is a result amongst the 4 sections of the test that you believe is inaccurate, if you see it very much different to the average score that you have, there is a process by which you can request an inquiry on that and a review and an evaluation of that. And that process can take somewhere up to 6 weeks, so bear that in mind. In terms of the test itself, something really important to highlight with IELTS is the communicative nature of the test. So this is an area where we feel that it does differ to other tests. The focus really is about your use of language, and you'll see in the design of the test, it's set up in a way that facilitates your ability to demonstrate your level of English through the 4 key sections that we'll come on to talk about in a bit more detail. So in terms of giving you some examples of those, I won't go into each one just because of the interest of time, and we will go through each of the 4 sections now upcoming. But just to give you a couple of examples of what we mean by this being communicative language that is linked to the academic environment. We have extended listening, so that will be linked to when you do study in a higher education institution, then typically lectures are mirrored by that extended listening. You will hear a variety of accents. My colleague Marianne already mentioned how that links to the real world. When you look at the reading section, the areas or the content within the reading, which we'll come on to, you'll see that they offer extended, at times dense discourse. Again, something typical of any academic reading materials that you will have whilst at university. And there is obviously also the time pressure that comes with that. Again, something that mirrors life on campus when you're carrying out your academic studies. For the writing, that's often based on readings. And that, again, is something that very much reflects what you will see in your academic content at university. It's very much about paying attention to the lectures and being able to provide your written pieces in response to that. And finally, with the speaking, that we'll come back to in a bit more detail, because I think this is often something that candidates very much ask about. We're looking to reflect what happens in real life, so being able to talk about a range of topics, not just those that are familiar with you, but also those that are slightly more abstract. So again, when you come on to higher education studies, that's very typical of that. So if we go into the different sections of the test now in a little bit more detail, you can see the format of the IELTS test is broken down into 4 key areas of language skill: listening, reading, writing, and speaking. And you'll see that there are different times allocated to each section, ranging from the 11 to 14 minutes of the speaking, the 30 minutes for listening, through to the full 60 minutes for both the reading and writing sections. So if we go into the detail of each one, just to give you a bit more familiarity with the type of questions and the content and context of those. With listening, there are 4 parts to that test, and there are 10 questions within each. Again, you will hear that variety of different accents which again is very kind of representative of real life. You know, we never kind of typically meet or speak to people from any one particular area when we're traveling. So I think both myself and Marianne are good examples of this. We're both here today to talk to you about IELTS. Marianne is from the US, I'm from the UK, so you may note different accents that we have. But there is a positive washback to that. So if you're preparing for IELTS, really, you're preparing yourself for real life. You'll see, not just with listening, but as we go through the different sections, this idea of the questions increasing in their complexity or maybe perceived as difficulty. That's a common theme of IELTS, so within each section of that. And you'll get a range of different listening types, whether it be monologues or conversations. And again, often conversations, when there are multiple people speaking at once, is when people who speak the language as a second language find it more difficult. So that's something very much to consider when you're preparing. You know, listen to a range of audios that have multiple people speaking at once. In terms of tips for you, is to kind of not really worry too much about your spelling and grammar at the beginning. You do have time. There is a 10-minute time at the end of the listening section where you can transfer your answers, so that gives you an opportunity to focus on that. And again, as with all 4 sections, really focus on the instructions that you are given. So make sure that you're paying a lot of attention to that, so you're making sure that you're getting things right. There are certain requests made during this section. So for example, to write no more than 3 words for the answer. Make sure that you do that, otherwise anything extended beyond that won't be considered. And also make sure that you're clear where you're asked to give 1-word answers or respond with a number, to make sure that you do that. So as I've mentioned, often people find it difficult when listening to multiple voices. How can you prepare for that? Just in your everyday, as well as the IELTS preparation materials, you can be listening to podcasts, especially those that have discussion pieces amongst multiple people, and also, you know, when you're watching movies or TV programs, again, it's often good to watch news programs and discussion programs that give you that experience of listening to multiple voices and discussions at once. Okay, so that's the listening. In terms of the reading section, you have 40 questions. So time management is key. That's 40 questions within a 60-minute slot. A number of techniques there are that are important to consider whilst you're preparing. So to be able to use both skimming and scanning techniques are very important. I'm sure a number of you will have come across in your studies, be it in English or in native language. But when we're reading texts, especially when we're under time pressure, it's important to be able to skim the text, which is just to really take a brief look over to take away what the key topic is. And then once you're able to skim, when you scan, you're looking for more specific detail. So at that point, you may have looked at the questions and understand what's being looked for. So you use scanning technique to really pick out keywords that you can zoom in and focus on that element of the text, so that you can respond to the question. There are a variety of topics that will be covered in the test, and these can vary test to test. They are typically taken from authentic text, but it is important to remember that this is an English test. It's not a test of a particular topic. So it's very much focusing on your ability to understand the language within the text that you're reading and be able to transfer your ideas through your answers. So in terms of preparing for that, really it's important to read as much as you can. By reading, you will familiarize yourself with a broader range of vocabulary. As the caption suggests, it's always a good idea to actually build up your own sort of personal dictionary, any new language that you come across in any reading text, to make a note of that and look up the meaning of it, so that you're both prepared for reading, but actually that will help you with the productive skills as well as in writing and speaking, because you do need to demonstrate a range of vocabulary. So if we move on to the writing section, so both listening and reading are those responsive language uses, and in the writing and speaking, we're talking about productive skills. In the writing module, there are 2 writing tasks. You are provided with a recommendation that you spend roughly 20 minutes on the first task and 40 minutes on the second. It's advisable to follow that instruction because that comes from the test content creators. The reason that we recommend that is, as you'll see here, task 1 asks you to write no more than 150 words, and for task 2, no more than 250 words. So you can see that the second part is more extensive in what you are expected to write, and therefore you should dedicate more time to that. As I mentioned before, the instructions are very important, so be clear on that. And the word limits are also. So examiners are instructed not to grade anything beyond the word limit, and therefore important that you are writing to that limit. In terms of any preparation, practice is key. So as well as familiarizing yourself with the content or typical questions and typical materials that are used in the IELTS test, and I spoke about preparation earlier, so that's something that you can see online with no charge. If you look up IELTS Ready, you'll be able to see a range of materials and practice there. But it's a good idea for you to practice your writing in a timed environment. So just keep practicing over and over and see how you manage writing to the word limit within that time. Also, for you to use examples of test taker responses. There are examples provided, again, through the IELTS Ready platform, but also through the preparation book materials that were mentioned earlier, so that you can get an understanding of the structure of answers that are expected. I think it's important to note, this is an English language test, so the expectation is that you write in a typical form that is typical of the English language. I think I've spent around 15 years in Latin America now. So one thing I would suggest is that the form of writing is quite different in Spanish language countries compared to English. So just familiarize yourself with what's expected through the test. So that's typically providing an introduction to what you are about to write, and then very succinct points. So each one of your paragraphs should provide a key point that responds to the question. Okay. Also, good sort of techniques to consider are brainstorming, thinking about the order of your response, and as I mentioned before, thinking of both an introduction and a conclusion to your written piece. Okay. And then finally, the speaking section. Again, in terms of IELTS and how it differentiates to a number of other language tests, the speaking section is an interview with a real person. So I think that's very key to remember. There are often options through your test center where there may be the possibility of video speaking, but it's still with a real person on the other end of the video. So in terms of the context of the test itself is very similar, but it depends test center by test center, whether or not you will have that with a person in the same room, or whether you will sit down and talk to that person via a video link. Again, that's something that you can look into and check at the moment of registering. In terms of the speaking interview itself, again, very much reflective of the communicative language nature of the IELTS test. So it allows you to demonstrate your best because it is natural communication, mirroring very much more real life, how we talk to one another. So it is slightly more conversational, and the examiner is able to adapt in response to what you are saying, the content of your responses, certainly in the third part. So just to talk you through those three parts, there is an introduction to the interview. So that would typically last 4 to 5 minutes. It's a Q&A on any personal topic, so things that are very much familiar to your daily life, maybe things about you, your family, your current working or study situation. So as I say, very much personal topics. On the second part, which runs 3 to 4 minutes, you will be asked to talk yourself. So it's pretty much a monologue from you as the test taker to talk about a specific topic that you are given. And then the third part is a two-way discussion, a back and forth, a question and answer effectively from the examiner relating to a slightly more abstract issue. So it might talk about an important topic that you are perhaps less familiar about. Again, I think it's really important. I think if we move on to the next slide, sort of considering the recommendations and preparation, I think it's important to consider again, I will emphasize the point that I made earlier. This is a test of English. So the examiner is not there to evaluate you or judge you on your opinions. They are there to evaluate your level of English. It's important to think about the marking criteria. So are you using the correct grammatical tense? So if you're talking about, I don't know, something from childhood, obviously you should be talking using the past tense, so you will be graded on that grammar as well as your vocabulary. So we talked about the benefit of extending and kind of practicing your vocabulary for reading, but that also comes into play for both the writing and speaking element. And another part of this, we talked about the different accents that you will hear. So you will hear a range of accents, but you don't need to provide us with a particular accent. I think often people, candidates, concern themselves or worry about their accent. Accent is not graded with the test. Pronunciation is. So pronunciation means that you are able to be understood. So are you clearly pronouncing the words? We expect everybody to have an accent. So in the same way that I have a British accent, we very much expect somebody to still carry an accent from their country. So don't be distracted or concerned about that. I've often seen candidates make the mistake of trying to replicate an accent that they've heard, be it their best attempts at a New York accent, you know what I mean? And they put this accent on and can often get distracted from the content of what they're trying to say. So yeah, just don't concern yourselves too much with that. However, what you might want to concern yourself with is building up a bank of expressions. So as it suggests here, let me think about, or maybe something like, as I say, this is not a test of your knowledge, so you may want to say something like, if you're asked on a particular topic you don't have a great deal of knowledge on, I don't have a great deal of knowledge on that, but, and then still express as much as you can. Again, I've seen a number of candidates down the years. We've seen people that may have spent an extended period of time studying in the US or the UK as children and come back and are pretty confident, they're pretty much bilingual, but then they don't feel that they have to extend themselves too much. So for an examiner, you have to remember the examiner is there to grade you on what you are telling them and on your speaking. So the less you speak, often the less there is for an examiner to be able to evaluate you on. So also don't make that mistake. Try not to spend too much time hesitating or thinking about a specific word. That can also happen to us. We get an idea in our head and we want to say that word. Sometimes, you know, it's important to just try to move on because the time is limited. So there is specific time. The examiner will hold you to that. It's also important to remember that as well. They do have a time limitation. You've got the 11 to 14 minutes. So they may cut you as you're giving your answer and move you on to the next question. Also important not to be put off by that. Again, it's a common thing that candidates can be distracted. They think, oh, he didn't like my answer, or did I say something wrong, or are they trying to finish this quickly? No, that's not the case, but they are trying to keep this and they are trying to make sure that they get to all of the questions so that they can go through the full evaluation. You can write notes in the speaking section. So again, that may be something that you want to consider, but it will be something very quick and something for you to reference to, and again, not be too distracted by anything beyond the answers that you want to give. So when it comes to practicing, you know, beyond the typical practice materials that are available and recommended to you, there are other things that you can do outside of that. So, you know, if you've got, you know, friends or colleagues or that you can practice with, that's often a good thing to do. So to practice speaking to somebody else in English is great, or even recording yourself. So, you know, pretty much all of us now have got a smartphone, and most of them have an audio function, a recording function, so you can record yourself speaking about different topics and then play it back to yourself, and you'll begin to recognize any of those things that you do commonly. So if you stumble over particular words, go back to your dictionary and find a different word. You know, it happens to me all the time in Spanish. There are particular words that I stumble over all of the time, so I avoid those and I come up with a different alternative. So a good idea for you to do that in English also. So by recording yourself and playing it back, you will familiarize yourself with things that you do that you might not otherwise recognize. Okay, so they're the four key sections or the four sections all in of the IELTS test. And just to reiterate again, really good idea to make sure that you are practicing and reminding yourself of what you need to do in each one. Okay, so I think at this point I'll hand back to Marianne to take us through to the end.
Thanks, Alex. I think those are some great tips for the students to keep in mind when preparing for IELTS. So why does all this matter? Why are we sharing this information with you all? Obviously, we want you to do well on the IELTS. We want you to get the score that you're hoping to get, but there's also more to it than that. So research actually shows that studying for the IELTS does improve your overall English proficiency. There are also studies that show that the higher the IELTS score that you have, the higher your English confidence. And when you have higher English confidence, you actually do better on campus. So you have better social and academic adjustment to life on campus. So there's many positive outcomes if you put forth the time and the effort to really prepare for IELTS. You're not only going to do well on IELTS, but it will make sure that you're doing well on campus once you arrive to school. So keep that in mind as you're working hard to prepare for the IELTS. So once again, just wanted to reiterate for test takers, we do have some test prep materials that Alex has already shared. But also there's some websites here, and I think this QR code will take you to a landing page that has all of our resources available. So feel free to refer back to those as well. And then I also put the test center search website in here. So this is where, I know we showed a screen of all the different cities where we have test centers. But if you actually want to register for a test and look up the test center locations, that's the URL as well. And then I also just wanted to quickly mention that we do have a scholarship that is available for international graduate students. So if you're applying to a graduate program, keep this in mind. It opens up every January. We do share this with the Fulbright program to pass along to any Fulbrighters as well. But it opens in January and the application usually closes around May. And you're notified sometime over the summer about the scholarship recipients. So just keep this in mind. It is money that goes straight to you. So this obviously Fulbright is a full paid program, but this would help cover any additional cost of sort of cost of living and that kind of thing while you're in the US. And I think that is it from us. So we can open it up to questions now.
Excellent. Thank you very much, both Marianne and Alex. I think this was a very throughout explanation. I have only one question. Maybe some of our audience will write it right now if you have any questions, or you can even open your mics. I think you are able to open your mics. Feel free if you have any questions to ask. Flor was asking, and maybe you already answered. In that case, could you please repeat your answer? What happened if we can't finish any session, I think any section on time? What would happen?
Great question. I might hand that over to Alex if you want to go into detail.
Yeah, sure. Not sure exactly what you would have in mind, but yeah, I mean, effectively, let's say the written part, let's say you end up spending too long in the first section and you complete that, and in your second written piece you only kind of get halfway through, then effectively you will be graded with what you have shared, what you have written. So one element of it will be not achieving the task of having written the full 250 words, but you will be evaluated. Let's say, I don't know, you managed to write the first 50 words and your introduction, so the examiner will take that into account and grade you on that. So you will kind of effectively be limited by, as I say, the material, the content that the examiner has to be able to grade. But yeah, it will be graded as much as it can be. I think the speaking, I don't think there should be any issue because you have the examiner in the room and they will guide you through and they will move you one by one. So I wouldn't see a circumstance where the speaking is not finished. So effectively, the written part is the only one that I would see a real risk of not getting all the way through it. So yeah, just bear in mind practicing and writing to that time limit, I would suggest.
Definitely. And that's, I guess, one of the advantages of the IELTS examination, right? That you have a human in front of you, guiding you, at least in one of the productive tasks.
Yeah.
All right, we have another one.
Yeah. Sorry, one quick thing I should mention is there is the feature now of a one skill reset. So let's just say the writing doesn't go the way you expected or wanted on the day. In the past, if you didn't get the score you needed, you would have to go back and redo the whole test. There is now the function to be able to take, let's say for argument's sake, just the written part of the test. But again, you have to check whether or not that is accepted by the organization that you're applying to. So we have that feature available, but it comes down to recognizing organizations and the university you apply to and whether or not they accept that. So
in the results, it would show that it was taken a second time, right? Yeah. So you get a full test certificate, but it will show that was retaken. Excellent. Thank you very much, Alex. I think I have a couple of questions more. Vianney says, sorry if you answered this before, but how does it work if we retake a section of the test, what you were just talking about? The new score erases the last score in the section, or it keeps the higher score? Yeah, I mean, I guess what she wanted to say is, if she goes worse on the second chance, will she be able to keep the best score that she got on the... You keep your original score, but yeah, typically I think if you're taking one, I think that would be rare, because if, let's say in the example that, you didn't finish the writing and didn't do very well, and that's why you want to retake it, then typically you would get the better score. And well, hopefully you will get more preparation in between the first and the second chance, right?
Exactly.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Marco says, if I have a high language requirement, how do you compare IELTS to with Cambridge tests such as SKY or CPE, sorry, and which one would you recommend to take?
So again, I mean, I would go with what the organization you're applying to accepts. I mean, one thing I would say with IELTS is it has the highest level of recognition globally of any international test. So, you know, for that reason, I think IELTS is a very good option. Through the webpage that we have shared, the IELTS.org, there is a search engine function where you can look up the institution, let's say, I don't know, University of Ohio. You can look them up and see what score requirement they have for IELTS. So that's a really good function to use and check in on. The other point I would make in reference to the Cambridge exams that your participant shared, remember that Cambridge, is one of the 3 IELTS partners. Effectively, they are the content creators of IELTS. So in terms of structure and content of the test, they are very similar in terms of their format. But I would say it comes down to the recognizing organizations. And I would say that IELTS has that very high recognition for these purposes. So it's preferential for that.
Excellent. Thank you for your advice. Thank you. And then Christian says, wait a second. How long does the process take approximately? I don't know, Christian, what you meant, the process of doing the actual exam to answering the exam, or how long does it take until you get your scores? Well, let's go over both. How long is the exam in terms of length of time?
Yeah, sure. So the written part of the exam is 2 hours and 30 minutes is the time allocation given to that. And then you've got your 11 to 14 minutes for the speaking section. Most of our test centers, you know, our objective is to have same day testing where we can. So you would do your written part of the test, let's say in the morning, and you can take the speaking interview in the afternoon, or vice versa. There's more flexibility now with IELTS on computer. Occasionally, the speaking could be on a different day. You are given options to select on when you register for the test. So that's the test length itself. In terms of the process end to end, for IELTS on computer, you can typically register up to 3 days before the test session, depending on availability. Again, we recommend that you apply and register, 1 to 2 months in advance. If it's for the paper-based test, that's longer. It's around 4 weeks ahead of the test session that you would need to register. And in terms of the results provision, 2 to 3 days for IELTS on computer, up to 13 days for IELTS on paper. So if you're registering and taking the test on computer, you could, in theory, register, take the test, and get your results in a time frame of something like 5-6 days. But I wouldn't recommend, I know we will have the tendency to leave things to the last minute, but for something as important as your language test to apply to a university, I think it's really important to be looking 1 to 2 months ahead of time, because of the danger of not finding the availability of the test session on a day that you want, at the test location you want, etc., etc.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I think we have a couple of questions that you just answered. For instance, what is best, IELTS or Certificate of Advanced English of Cambridge? We just said it depends on what you need, and you make sure that it covers the requirement of the institutions that you're interested in, right? Then Braulio says another thing that we just answered. What do you think is best? Finish the test or take time? Or take my time and be evaluated with what I can do. Obviously, the objective of the test, all of the tests, is that you finish successfully every task. So make sure that you have enough practice so that you can successfully finish the task with everything that you are asked within the time schedule, the time limit. I don't know, Alex, Marianne, if you want to add anything to it on that idea.
I just say, I mean, I think that's a really important point you make. And again, I'll just reiterate something I said throughout, which is the examiners are there to test you, and you need to be prepared for the test that you are doing. So even if you demonstrate excellent English by completing the first of the 2 written tasks, if you don't do anything on the second one, you're limiting your ability to be scored. So it's about your comprehension and understanding of the test instructions, as well as, you know, not just showing small elements of your ability in English.
Right. Okay. For the following question, I want to introduce my co-worker, my partner, Jorge Reyes, one of the organizers of this workshop. Hi, Jorge, are you with us? Hello.
Hello, Marianne and Alex.
Hey,
Hey there.
All right. Why don't you manage the following one? Dice Mextli Martinez. I am applying. Oh, can you read it?
Yeah, sure, I can.
Good.
Yeah. So I am planning to apply for the Negocios Binacionales Scholarship. According with the requirements, I can take this test. But do you know if the companies has a particular, if the companies where I will be doing like the internship will have a preference for some test?
Do they mean companies or the universities that they're applying to?
Yeah, well, this specific scholarship, the Binational Business Scholarship, is aimed to help students to have a professional experience for 9 months in companies. This is a different scholarship besides the graduate one scholarship. So this one, it is more focused on students doing this professional experience at some specific companies through Fulbright. This is another scholarship from Fulbright. So Mextli's question, I guess, will go towards the preference of some of these companies, talking about perhaps the professional context, which yeah, I guess that's the question, right?
Right. Yeah. So I mean, my recommendation would obviously be to reach out to these companies to understand sort of their policy. But I would say most of the time when we're working with universities or organizations that accept IELTS, usually they have a policy where they list out different tests that they accept, and there's not a preference one over the other. But I would definitely reach out to the organizations just to better understand sort of their policies and everything like that.
Yes, and Mexley, remember that this is the first phase, right? I mean, either the scholarship for graduate programs or either the binational business scholarship will accept either Duolingo, IELTS, or TOEFL IBT. So the preferences of the companies might be perhaps different, but for the first phase, these are the options that you may have.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we have another question from Daniela Sosa. Can I retake a section in a different center than my first exam?
No. Simply, no, it has to be through the same test center. So bear that in mind. Again, I know a lot of test takers may travel to a particular center and may choose a center because of the convenience of the availability. So yeah, have that in mind, because it will have to be through the exact same test center you did the original with.
Okay, thank you. Next one. For Mexico City, and I guess it applies for any city through Mexico, through the country. For Mexico City, is there an official test center, or it depends on the date of the test?
So yeah, I mean, all test centers, you're looking for an official test center, you'll find the range of those. I think we shared the link, but if you go through IELTS.org and select the city, all of those centers that are listed are official.
Okay. The next one, we only have 2 more guys, so thank you for bearing with us, Alex and Marianne. how the grading section is scored. Let's say I grade some American words mixed with British words. Is there any recommendations? I mean, let's say I grade color, C-O-L-O-R, instead of color, C-O-L-O-U-R.
Sure. No, I'm tempted to say there's bonus points for British English, but I'm only kidding. No, there's no, very important to make the point that the name of the test is International English Language Testing System, because it is truly international. So that there's absolutely no issue with using either American English or British English. We do typically recommend that you try to be consistent throughout, but we recognize that all forms of the language are accepted and are equally valid, and that it is an international language, with different elements to it. So I don't know if Marianne wants to add anything to that.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's exactly what I was going to say. Sometimes students will include like sort of slang in their essays. So I think in British English, you call the trunk of a car the boot, I think.
That's right.
So you might make a reference to, the boot or the trunk. Either way, it would still be considered correct. You're not going to be marked differently depending on sort of which version of English you're using in your essay. So don't worry about that.
Okay, and the final one, I guess that's thank you for your response. In that case, can I book another full test in a different center, or should it be in the same center than the first test? I guess that
no, there's no restriction. If you're talking about two completely full tests and not retakes, then yeah, you've got the freedom and flexibility to register wherever you like, because again, we accept that, I don't know, if you took it one time and in a city where you're currently studying, it might be Guadalajara, but actually you live in, or your family is in Mexico City, so the next time you take it, it's more convenient for you in Mexico City, then yeah, there's no issue there.
Okay, well, I guess we have covered, a lot of material. And thank you, Marianne, for this. Alex, thank you as well. Thank you very much. The record will be uploaded into our Facebook group as well as on our playlist on YouTube in the Education USA Mexico channel. So be sure to subscribe. And I feel very influencer when I say that all the time, though. But be sure to subscribe for these channels, for our social media channels and all that. And yeah, thank you very much, Alex and Marianne. I see some other questions, but these were covered throughout the presentation. So guys, be sure to review the presentation again. And thank you very much, Alex and Marianne, for this.
No, thanks to you guys. Thanks to everyone here.
Thanks so much for having us.
Adri, I don't know if you want to close the session.
Just making sure that everyone is in our Facebook group. Remember that we can also answer some of your questions there, and see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.